Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Stressonomics Masterclass. This time we are talking about digital overdrive, connectivity, boundaries, and burnout. And I've got a guest with me today as well, which is even more exciting because this is actually the first in these. I've been doing these lives kind of once a month for a little while now. Before the masterclasses, they were just kind of these little monthly musings that I did. But this is the first time that I've done it with a guest on as well. And I am very excited to have Sam Flynn with me, who's a digital wellbeing expert. Sam, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to
Oh,
chat.
it's an absolute pleasure and an honor. It's a subject that's really interesting to me. I have a mixed bag when it comes to my own digital boundaries. There's been certain things that I've done quite well at. There's been other things which I struggle with. So I'm going to take quite a lot from this, just personally, never mind the value that we'll give to the people watching. And on that note, if you are watching this, please can you say hello to us in the comments, because we love a bit of interaction. If you've got any questions as you go along, drop those in the comments as well. So you could be watching this on LinkedIn, maybe you're watching it on YouTube. Either way, hopefully we should get both of those being pulled through into the studio here. Let us know where you're watching from as well. Where in the world are you? Say hello, and also hit those react buttons, hit the like button on YouTube, or hit any of the reaction buttons on LinkedIn, because if nothing else, it makes me feel incredibly validated. Very, very needy person, and I need that validation. So please hit those buttons. I can see we've got a couple coming in. Louise, hello. Lila, hello. Good to see you on here. I know Lila's in Denmark. Louise, where are you watching from? So yeah, please keep those coming. Keep saying hello. Let us know where you're watching from, and interact all the way through. So, Sam, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell people a bit about what you do and how you've ended up in this position. Why is it that you do what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi everyone. I am a digital wellbeing coach, trainer, and speaker. And it's not something that you obviously decide to do when you're at school. So, my journey to becoming this, it started really by doing a master's in organizational psychology. So, all about people in business essentially and how we engage them and get the most out of them. That led me to start my first business, which was an employee survey company, which is still going actually. And that quickly, strangely segued into becoming starting a social media training business. I got really interested in social media. This was over 13 years ago now, and used it a lot to promote my survey company. Went on courses, thought they were really badly delivered, thought I know far more than the trainer actually knows. It was a very new thing back then to even discuss it in a business context. And so I decided to set up a social media training business myself. And that was 13 years ago. And that very quickly grew bigger than the employee survey business. So I've been training businesses in the use of social media for 13 years, very much immersed in the digital world. And it was probably during the pandemic, really, that I noticed my own digital use was swaying more to the negative side and was having a really negative impact on me and my life, probably similar to a lot of people during the pandemic. I was working a lot on my phone because I had my 3 young girls at home to try and look after and do what I needed to do with them whilst running a business. So I worked a lot from my phone, and it soon became a permanent fixture in my hand. And it just really then got me interested in what is this negative impact it's having on me? Why is it having a negative impact on me? And I pretty much deleted all apps off my phone for a month and instantly felt better, felt released, and felt like I was living a more joyful life. And that's really where my digital wellbeing journey started. And from there, I have read many, many books about it, watched many videos, and done a couple of courses actually myself in it. And now I help other people. I help businesses understand digital culture and the impact that the digital solutions we use every single day. I mean, we're using one right now. The impact that they can have, both positive and negative, and also personal smartphone use as well, and the impact that can have. And before we kind of move into the conversation, I really want to stress that digital well-being is all about having a positive relationship with the digital world. It's not about saying, let's all, throw our smartphones in the toilet. Let's switch off from every digital solution. Let's, completely go on into a switched off life, because that's not the world we're living in anymore. So it's very much about making sure that we've got a really positive relationship with the digital world.
I think that that's one of the things which drew me to your approach more than I don't see loads of people who specialize in the digital boundaries, digital well-being, but I do see a few. And I think the thing which really drew me to your approach was that it seemed like it had this balance, that you weren't throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. It wasn't about disconnecting completely, but it was about finding that balance point. And that sits very tightly with my whole approach to stress management and well-being and quality of life and performance and all of those things, because there isn't anything with any of these tools and with any of these parts and areas of our life, they're not all good and all bad. It's how much they take over, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's like, if we put it into other examples, having a glass of wine on a Friday night, great, but drinking 5 bottles of wine every day before midday, not so great. So it's a bit like everything in life, isn't it? Having a slice of chocolate cake instead of eating the whole big cake.
Yeah.
It's all about how we have that balance and make sure that we do as well, because I think not enough people really think about the balance, and are they doing enough to make sure that they do have switch off time, and they're not just constantly plugged in, which is very easy to do.
Yeah, and as you said, like the more digital tools that have been adopted, and of course this is something that's been going on for decades in terms of technological advancement and the things that are invented to make our lives easier or to make business easier or to connect us more, has been accelerated over the past 3 years, while we had our hands forced and we had to become more connected digitally because of people working remotely. And now, yes, people are heading back into the office and have been doing for the last couple of years, but there's a lot of organizations who are taking a more hybrid approach, and therefore they're utilizing more tools than perhaps they were 5 years ago. Even though those tools were still there, we had video conferencing, we've had that for a long time, but a lot of organizations were quite slow on the uptake, because it was another thing, another expense, another skill for people to learn. But then they had to. Have you seen an increase in, you mentioned yourself in terms of your own technology usage over kind of lockdowns and pandemic, that period of time? Have you noticed similar in organizations as well, in larger companies?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in pre-pandemic, of course, some people could come home with their work laptop, log in at home, crack on with work outside of working hours, absolutely, or have a work mobile that has their emails on that they could be checking at 3 a.m. if they wanted to. So of course that did exist pre-pandemic, but the pandemic has absolutely escalated that without a doubt, which in a business sense sounds great. Like, we don't even need people to leave the home anymore in order to be logging in and working and being productive. But actually in a well-being and health and stress and burnout sense, that is the problem. There's not that kind of switch off, is there? There's not that time when actually the office is getting locked up and you're going to have to leave. There's that feeling always that it's just there, and now the kids are in bed, I could just log in and finish that bit of work I was doing, or I could just send those emails that suddenly are playing on my mind. And waking up in the morning and there's your phone next to you thinking, actually, I could just check my work emails before I get out of bed. And I think that definitely the pandemic has escalated that quite rapidly without businesses really thinking of that negative impact. I think so many businesses, as I said, have really just thought about this is great for these reasons and not really thought about, well, what does that mean for our people if they are logging in out of contractual hours, if they are maybe not switching off at the end of the day and carrying on through into the evening, if they are doing things like checking work emails first thing in the morning or on a Saturday morning when they should be enjoying life. I don't think enough organizations really have kind of considered the negative impact that can have.
And what are those negative impacts?
So we've got several ones really. So I think probably the first one I'll focus in on is sleep. The digital world has been shown to really negatively impact our sleep. From constantly being switched on, like I say, staring at screens, to doing things like checking work emails last thing at night just before we go to sleep, and of course trying to then put our heads on the pillow and switch off when we've essentially just flooded our brains full of things to be thinking about is really bad for us. So sleep is at an all-time low, and it's no surprise really in terms of just how much time we're spent staring at screens and filling our heads with information all the time. Mental health is another big one. We've just had World Mental Health Day a couple of days ago. And there is, again, a very, very strong correlation between the digital world and mental health. I did actually put a post out on World Mental Health Day, which was all about the wonderful positive impacts that the digital world can have on our mental health. So I don't want to discount that by any means.
No, I thought that apologies for interrupting, but I just wanted to say that I thought that post was brilliant. And for people who are watching this who perhaps didn't see that, I think that, once we've had a look at what some of these negative impacts are, it would be worth having a look at some of the positive impacts as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's so true. Because I always get people going, yeah, but when I do deliver kind of the negative, they go, oh yeah, but there's apps like Calm and Headspace, and absolutely there's some brilliant tools that can help. But yeah, mental health. I mean, mental health is multifaceted, really. So we've got things like, for example, we all know the tools and techniques and think, but we don't know them all. But there are certainly lots of things we can be doing to improve our mental health. And yet so many of us say, I ain't got time for that. I haven't got time to be meditating, going out for a walk in nature, spending time with loved ones. And so again, looking at time, the time that we're taking away from ourselves by logging in out of hours. And it's been kind of delivered in research for years and years, the impact that the presenteeism has on absenteeism and on stress and on burnout. And your presenteeism 20 years ago was, everyone else leaving the office at 5 p.m. in the old school world of 9 to 5, and you kind of thinking, oh, I'll stick around and I'll carry on working and I'll look like I'm the, the committed one here. But now actually we've all got the opportunity to be digitally present all the time, digital presenteeism. And so working essentially all the time and not having that switch off time can be really damaging in terms of building stress, building anxiety, and building depression as well, which is obviously something as businesses we need to avoid in terms of not only our employee well-being, but in their productivity too. And then probably the last one I'll mention before we kind of go on to the positives is focus and attention. Our focus and attention as humans has never been lower. I speak to people all the time who say this, like, I can't read a book anymore. I can't focus on anything for more than a minute. I feel like my mind's constantly going one way or another. You see it all shared on social media as well, like that people's brains are like, their desktop browser, so many tabs open at once. And so we can't focus because our brains aren't actually designed to multitask. We are actually designed to work on one thing at a time. And the digital world essentially is doing the opposite. It's bombarding us. So, for example, if you have Teams chats running all day, then people are being bombarded by those notifications coming through. If you've got email notifications turned on and every time there's an email coming in, if you've got, say, a work phone and you're sat watching Netflix at 9 o'clock at night, and even though your work phone's in the kitchen, you can hear the noise it makes when, an email comes in. All of this is really, really bad for our ability to focus and pay attention. And so when we are back sat at our desks and in work time and trying to be focused, actually the average office worker can now only focus on task for about 3 minutes before they lose focus. And research has shown it takes on average about 27 minutes for us to fully get focused back on task. So those numbers don't really line up. It essentially means we are never fully focused on task. And there is actually a really, really interesting study that Hewlett-Packard did back in 2014. So it'd be interesting to do it now with even more digital notifications coming through. But essentially they had 2 groups sit an IQ test. And one group could just do it without any kind of interruptions. And the other group, while they were doing it, received digital notifications coming through. And the group that had those digital notifications, IQ scores were 10 points lower on average than the other group. And they compared that to another similar piece of research that had been done on the effects of smoking marijuana on IQ. And that had only lowered IQ test points by 4. So actually digital notifications are having a bigger impact on our ability to perform than smoking joints, so it kind of really puts it into perspective, because you'd certainly be frowned upon if you were sat in a meeting on a Zoom call smoking a joint. And yet what is happening is people are being bombarded all day every day, and it's really, really lowering their focus and attention.
I think it's an interesting one as well, and I'll throw this out to the people who are watching as well. If they've got any experience of this, an experience of noticing a drop in their focus and attention as a result of the increase in digital notifications and digital demands, and that blurring of boundaries, and that feeling of having to always be contactable at all times, rather than saying, actually, do you know what? I'm going to spend the next half hour, 90 minutes in focus mode. I'm going to turn off all notifications and just focus on the work that I've got to get done. Often people feel guilty about having to do that, even though they know that that's when they're going to do their best work. So if anyone's watching and has got personal experience of that, drop that in the comments, share your thoughts, share your experiences, some things that have worked for you, and so on and so forth, because that interaction will help guide this conversation as well. So, you're talking about those negative impacts, and I've just seen a message from Louise there, who also happened to be sitting next to Lila over in Denmark. So that's lovely. 14 tabs open in 3 different windows as we speak. Now, Louise, is that actually on your browsers, or is that in your mind? My question there, because I have got a lot of tabs open in terms of my actual computer, and a lot of tabs open in my mind as well. Lila said, I have turned off email notifications so as not to be disturbed all the time. I think that that's such an important thing to do when we're going to talk about, ways to improve our digital well-being. We're going to talk about how we can take back a little bit of control over our digital boundaries, and help maintain good digital well-being as a result, and avoid burnout. So that's one of them. And I don't have, in fact, most apps on my phone, I don't have notifications for most apps on my phone for that reason. I'm so easily distracted. But if we go back to those positives, just to add a little bit of balance, a bit of a counterpoint to this, a lot of organizations are using these platforms, such as you mentioned, Teams chats, Slack is another one, and they're using them for connectivity. What are the positives of that? And are there positives to not just performance and productivity, but also to well-being and quality of life and actual human connection? What would you say the positives to those systems are?
Oh, absolutely. Particularly with more people working from home, which can be hugely isolating, especially if it's not hybrid working, but full working from home, which I know a lot of businesses have stayed in a 100% working from home mode. I think actually it's incredibly important for team cohesiveness, for engagement with other stakeholders in the business, for, as you say, just people's well-being, of having people to chat to through the day, as opposed to just feeling isolated all day, every day, and not leaving the house. So without a doubt, there's huge positives to those kind of communication channels that allow for people to not be physically present together, to still have that ability to communicate and to get their questions answered as well, to be able to go, oh, does anyone know how to do this? Or, all of those things are hugely important. And to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the idea of 100% remote working for that reason. I think there's a need for human connectivity, and, research has shown that face-to-face interaction is incredibly important for our mental well-being, because as humans, that's what we're designed. We're social creatures. So take people away from that face-to-face interaction, and it really can have a negative impact on them. So I'm actually, much more of a fan of the idea of maybe hybrid working, but also having people in together, and, using that opportunity to meet together. But yeah, at least we have things like Teams and Slack that allow for that. So absolutely, there's a huge positive side to it. And I can see how, if I didn't mention the positive side, so many people would push back and say, I can't imagine my day without the Teams chat going, for example. And I completely understand that.
I think that it makes it more of a tricky arena to navigate when there are positives and negatives, because if there was something which we could categorically say, this whole thing is bad, just get rid, that's a very easy thing to do, right? But if you've got something which has pros to it as well, navigating that and finding that kind of tightrope to walk is quite a challenging thing to do. And hopefully we'll be able to address some of those concerns, not just from a kind of how can we improve our own digital well-being, but for those people who are leading teams, how can they improve or support the digital well-being of their people? So the responsibility for a lot of these things may still rest on the individual, but the individual can only choose between the options given to them by the people that control the environment. And if we're talking about working environment, those are the line managers and the senior leadership. So it's all very well saying to people you should have better digital boundaries, but if those boundaries aren't being modeled by the leaders, if they're not being supported, if the expectations are not managed effectively of what level of contact people are going to have. In fact, touching on the thing about remote work, I mean, this is maybe a devil's advocate thing. And it's not 100% relevant to digital boundaries. Now, I am completely 100% with you on face-to-face contact between people. There are huge benefits. They're well documented. In fact, social isolation is a bigger marker for all-cause mortality. It's a bigger predictor for all-cause mortality than smoking, drinking, poor diet, sedentary lifestyle. Social isolation is more likely to kill you young. We don't know the full mechanisms of this. It could well be due to the fact that stress levels are higher when you're socially isolated. You're less resilient because you're on your own. We know that resilience is a group characteristic, not just an individual characteristic. And if we're under more stress, then that can have all kinds of physical and psychological consequences. So maybe that's the mechanism, but we know that outcomes-wise, people who are socially isolated die younger. Having said that, does your social face-to-face contact have to come from work colleagues?
No, not necessarily. Absolutely not. But I think there has to be an acknowledgement that some people don't have as much opportunity outside of work, you know. So I think, again, it's back to that kind of, there isn't a right answer, is there? You know, for some people, their only interaction might be through a work setting. You know, for example, if they live alone, family aren't close by, limited number of friends, or friends are maybe, you know, if you're a single person living on your own and your friends have all got families and busy at the weekends, you know, it's not always a given that you can go, okay, I'm working at home all day on my own, so I'm going to arrange to meet people every evening, or I'm going to do different things every evening. And of course, it brings into play other factors such as introversion. You know, it's easy to tell someone, well, just join a club or get out in the evening and start a new hobby with a team or something. And the thought for some people is just hugely distressing. So yeah, without a doubt, it doesn't have to come from work. But I think the reality for a lot of people is they're probably 10 years ago, when we were majority working away from the home, those people that you're working with every day were probably the people that you spent the most time with in your life, you know, because of the numbers around how long we're spending working. So I think it's definitely something that, you know, is to be considered, certainly, and not just scrapping the idea of ever having offices again or having people in the workplace again. I think it is something that's definitely needs to be considered.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that there's a lot of stuff which is, like you said, there's no right or wrong answer. There's no cut and dry. This is the way to do it. This isn't the way to do it. It depends on the industry, the company. I know organisations who have. I was talking to an organisation recently who work in app development, and they've got a team of. I'm trying to think of what the numbers were now. I think they were talking about 50 or 60 people across 15 different countries.
Right.
And so the benefits of drawing on diversity of experience and diversity of background, nationalities, religions, ethnicities, genders, sexualities, and all of that is opened up by the ability to work remotely. For example, I live in a very homogenous, I think is the word, part of the world. I live in southwest England. It's not a very diverse area. That's my only bugbear with it. I love this part of the world. I grew up here. I love it to bits. I don't think I'd live anywhere else. But I don't feel comfortable with how homogenous it is, how white it is, how middle class it is, for the most part. Of course, there is some diversity, because I feel like bringing my kids up here is a bit blinkered. So I like to take them off to other places, and I like the fact there's more representation of various groups in the media and in TV shows and stuff like that than there ever has been before. So my kids are getting exposed to things that way, even though we're growing up in a very in a place which doesn't reflect that. And I think that being able to have people who work fully remote, let's say your office was somewhere like Plymouth, right, or in the rural areas outside of that, if you can only recruit from that locality geographically, then you are very limited in terms of what you can recruit in terms of experience. I know that's not a direct link to the whole thing around boundaries and burnout and well-being, but I think that it's very much related to connectivity and the positives of having these communication tools available.
Oh, 100%. I think that's, again, like a big bonus is, like you say, we don't have to just look at who can travel to this place of work anymore. Like, the opportunities are endless. Although I must admit, I have noticed that a lot of business, when I've seen kind of jobs ads come up and that kind of thing on LinkedIn, a lot of them that are remote say, but would prefer if you worked in the area, so that you've got still that ability to meet quite easily as a team and such like. But yeah, absolutely. I think it's amazing that we now have the opportunity to work globally, to meet globally online. And without a doubt, it's got to be classed on the positive side of the digital world.
Yeah, for sure. And to do things like this, of course, you and I are in two different locations, and we've got people who are watching this from all kinds of different locations, which is always good fun. I always find that quite exciting, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're traveling without the carbon footprint.
I know,
I think that what would be really great now, we've kind of established some of the pitfalls and some of the positives. I would be really interested to hear some specific examples of platforms or pieces of software or applications that have been common problems for people. We've talked about Slack, we've talked about Teams. Are they quite commonly problematic? Are there other things? Is it as simple as emails and stuff like that? And then moving on to some ways that individuals can improve their situation and improve their boundaries as an individual. What steps can they take? What's within their power to change? And then people who are in leadership positions, people who have got teams, people who have got people within their care professionally, how can they help support those boundaries for the people that are around them? So first off, any particular problematic bits of software, or rather software that's being used in a problematic way quite commonly?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most digital tools I would probably put in that category, not necessarily in every business too. If it was on a scale of positive to negative, that it was completely down the negative end. But as I said earlier, I think so many businesses only see the positive end and then forget, oh, actually, it could be impacting people in this way. So without a doubt, ones we've already mentioned, emails is probably the number one. When I'm speaking to people, it's probably the first thing that always comes up. I'm a slave to my emails. My email inbox is always going. I get too many emails that I don't need to see. I'm expected to respond really straight away, which means they've got to have those notifications coming up. Like, there's a level of expectation in the workplace to respond instantly. I was speaking to someone the other day who said she'd actually checked her work emails on a Saturday morning, and she had had an email from her manager that was quite negative, having a bit of a go at her about a decision that she'd made. And she said it ruined her whole weekend. Her weekend was essentially gone because she was in full work mode of, how am I going to solve this issue now? He's not happy with me. I thought I was making the right decision. I've got this all wrong. When actually there's two sides to that. If he hadn't sent that email that Saturday morning and she hadn't read that email that Saturday morning, it would have waited till the working week when we were paid to have these worries. But the second thing is that he could have also just relaxed over it on the weekend and come up with a completely different approach to it by Monday. So emails, without a doubt, is the number one, I'd say, in speaking to people, that is an issue. The second one is actually online meetings. Again, it's too easy now for people to go to meetings. So if we flip back to when meetings were all in person, it could physically be more tricky. If you had different locations, for example, it would be, right, well, for you to be at that meeting, we're going to have to book you a hotel, or we're going to have to conference call you in, or we're going to have to figure this all out. Now it's kind of like, oh, do you want to jump on this Zoom call with us? Or actually, maybe you could jump in on this meeting for 10 minutes and just let us know about this thing. And I've got a family member, actually, I won't name any names, but I've got a family member who is a global marketing director, and she was showing me her diary once, and essentially she said, look at my diary for the week. When am I actually meant to do any work? Because her whole diary, and often they were overlapping, was all meetings. There was nothing but meetings for her whole 5 days of the week. And I think that has been a big issue as well. It's very, very easy now to invite people into meetings just so they can give their quick input, and then they end up staying in the meeting, or that are kind of logging into meetings but sitting in the background because they've got to try and get on with their work. So yeah, Zoom, Teams, whatever meeting platform people are using, that's a real issue in a lot of businesses. They haven't quite figured out, a lot of them, who needs to be in which meeting and how do we make sure people don't have meeting overload, which is definitely another issue. And then, yeah, it is the Teams, the Slack, the constant notifications. There was one business that their team was running a constant Teams conversation. But when I looked into it, they were saying things like, at so-and-so, is it okay to give you a ring now? At so-and-so, could we do this, 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 and this? So their Teams chat, a lot of the conversations were actually just between two people and didn't need to be seen by the whole team. And yet everything was happening in that Teams chat. So the people that didn't need to see it were still having their focus taken away to, oh, is this for me? No, it's not. Right. Carry on with my work. Oh, what's that? No, I don't need to know about that. So again, it's like understanding that, a better understanding of how to use those platforms to communicate effectively is really, really important. And then I would say after that, it's just simply the ability to log in out of hours. So logging in on holiday, logging in at weekends, logging in the evening, the actual ability to do that, I'd say, is probably one of the other issues that comes up.
It's interesting stuff, and it's stuff that I've come across as well. Although it's not the area that I directly work in, it's something which, when we're working with teams to look at stress and look at stress management, not just at an individual level, but at a team level, at an organizational level. What's the system, not just the individual? Where is the stress coming from? Meetings is such a huge one that always comes up. A lot of people will say that workload is one of their biggest sources of stress, but usually when people are talking about workload, they're thinking about, I've got too much of the wrong kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about the amount of work, it's about the type of work, and also how much time do they have to complete that work around all the meetings that they're being booked into. So workload is such a catch-all term, and I think that it's foolish to use that as a data point because it can mean so many different things. Because when you have the conversations, often it is, I am constantly having to do X, Y, Z, so I have no time to do A, B, and C.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really insightful and really fascinating, and it's certainly something I've experienced as well. I'd love to hear as well from anyone watching this, are those particular areas? Is it email? Is it meetings? Is it Slack channels, Teams channels? Where are you getting the most challenge digitally? Where are you finding that those digital boundaries are being blurred? Where do you feel like your those work things are bleeding into your non-work life? Is it through any of those particular channels, those particular functions? Is it elsewhere? Would love to get some input on that as well. Now, in terms of how to make improvements, I think that what we could do is, going back to your example of the email that was sent on the Saturday morning, we have got two sides of that. As you said, we've got the person receiving it, and then we've got the person sending it. The person receiving it, if we take into consideration that as a very personal thing, when you're on the receiving end of this stuff, what could you have done in that situation to improve things? And if you are the leader, if you are the person who is sending the email, the manager, the line manager, the people leader of some description, what could you have done differently in that situation to support good digital wellbeing and to support those boundaries?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if we go on the leader side first, leaders are exactly that, aren't they? They lead and people follow. So it's quite easy for leaders to say to their team, look, I don't want you to check your emails at the weekend, and I don't want you to be checking your emails out of hours or while you're on holiday. Please don't do that, and that sounds like a great leader, doesn't it? But actually what a great leader also needs to do is do exactly the same thing, not be sending emails at the weekend, not be sending emails out of hours, because where they lead, people will follow. And despite the verbal kind of contract of please don't do this, it's only really reiterated if the leader doesn't do it too. So the first instance in that case would be, don't send that email on a Saturday morning. And I know it sounds really simple, and it can be that if something's playing on your mind, write an email out. As a leader, I know sometimes it's like, actually, I really need to get this said, or this is playing on my mind right now and I might forget or whatever, fine. I've spoken to many individuals who say, actually, sometimes my best work is in the evening or whatever, or I feel like I sleep better if I just do that half hour of bashing out a few emails. Fine, but don't send them, and I think that's really important. Have them sat there in your outbox, ready to go on Monday morning or on the next morning at 8:30, 9 a.m., whatever time. And therefore you are setting that precedent of don't be going on your emails out of hours. So role modeling is very, very important as a leader. And then on the individual side, then making sure that you understand, actually, I think, this is obviously a huge part of stress management as well, is really finding your own balance. And I think the problem is things like emails can become highly addictive. I want to know what I'm missing out on all the time. I was doing a talk actually a couple of weeks ago to a group of business owners. And one thing I said to them is, we think we're missing out on something. And therefore we go on these digital solutions, be it social media or emails or whatever else it might be. But actually, by going on them, we are missing out on something. And what we're missing out on is our lives. What we're missing out on is our children growing up and our families that are there with us at that time, and our weekends that we could be living a joyful, happy weekend instead of being stressed all weekend about an email we've received that morning. So really kind of reframing things in your mind can help you think, actually, what's most important to me in life is not knowing what emails I've got in on a Saturday morning, and it's these people around me, and it's this thing I love doing, and it's going for a run, and it's going for a walk, or whatever it might be. So doing some kind of reframing work is really important. I also tell people often to have a bit of a joy list, and that's like a list of things that bring joy into their life. And then if they're kind of tempted to go into the digital side of things and think, I might just check my email. No, go on your joy list and do one of those things instead. And, if in 10 minutes, 15, 20, half an hour, you're still thinking, no, I really do want to check my email and it's playing on my mind, do it, but do the thing that brings you joy first, and then do that thing. And then having it, I think, as the culture of the organization. And that's often starts from the top with culture, but sometimes it can go the other way. If enough people start saying, actually, I don't I'm finding myself checking my emails more and more. I'm finding myself logging in more and more, and I don't think that's good for me. I don't think it's good for my family. I'm getting more stressed and burnt out and so on. Then actually starting to speak to people about that and raise that as an issue. The more people that do that, obviously, the more likely we're going to have a digital culture shift than if it's just a case of sitting and waiting for someone from the top to notice that everyone hates it. So there's a few different sides to that, really. And then I think another flip side of this as well is managing our own digital well-being outside of the workplace that doesn't involve work. So not just kind of logging out of work for the day and then sitting all evening scrolling on TikTok, or going, I'm not going to check my work emails on a Saturday morning, but I am going to sit and scroll on 50 different apps on my phone instead, which is also really bad for our well-being as well. So, understanding the ways in which we can improve our own digital well-being outside of the workplace too can really help as well.
I really like the idea of the joy list, and it ties in a bit with the kind of self-care toolkits or the stress management toolkits that I help people to build. And the reason I like that is that often when we're trying to break a habit, it's much easier if we replace it with something else rather than just trying not to do it, right? So you see it with people who are trying to break, even with addictions and stuff like that. If people are trying to work through alcoholism or drug addictions and things like that, often you'll find that people replace that with, they might replace it with religion, or they might replace it with exercise. And you see these people who were former heroin addicts, for example, who've turned into multiple Ironman finishers. And the reason is they've almost taken that obsessive addiction predisposition that they have, and they've put it into something else. Now, that's not always necessarily 100% great. Some people can be addicted to exercise, right? Some people can end up addicted to work. Some people can be addicted to all kinds of things which they've just replaced their addiction. However, perhaps what they've moved it to is less destructive than what they were addicted to in the past, or what the habit was in the past, depending on what level they're at. So the reason we can see this happening is because people still have this need to get the the dopamine or whatever it happens to be that hits them and gives them that little buzz, and they need to get that elsewhere. So having that joy list means that you're not just sit there twiddling your thumbs going, no,
Yeah.
here's my phone, right? I'm not going to look at my phone. I'm going to sit here. I'm just going to sit here and do nothing. And
Yeah.
all I can do the entire time is think about my phone, right?
Absolutely.
Whereas if you look at the joy list, and this is why I love it, is that you go, there's things on there which you don't immediately think of because your brain's swimming in all the other crap you've got going on. And you look at the list and it says, go for a walk, have a bath, make a cup of tea, read a book, phone a friend, all of these things which you could use instead, and you go, oh yeah, actually there's that book that I've been meaning to read, or I started it and I'm only 2 chapters in and I'm going to read a bit of that instead. You start reading. While you're reading, you get lost in that instead of getting lost in scrolling TikTok. You get lost in that book, and then you finish, and you've read like a few pages, or you read a couple of chapters, and you put it down, and you feel like, oh, I feel really good. I really enjoyed that. Most of the time, people don't feel like that when they come off their phone. Most people feel a little bit sapped of energy, or a little bit sapped of enthusiasm, and you feel a bit flat. Whereas if you read a book, or you listen to some music, or you go for a walk, or you speak to a loved one, then you actually come away feeling built up a little bit. And so I love that idea, because then you've got something to replace it with. I just want to address as well, I've just seen a comment there from Partha as well. I can relate to what Sam said. It's also the FOMO effect with emails and meetings for both organisers and attendees. Absolutely. And that's true in a work environment and in a personal life environment.
Oh, yeah.
That drive to check social media, what's happening on Facebook, what's happening on Instagram. For me, it's LinkedIn. I spend far too much time on LinkedIn. I'm not on Facebook anymore, haven't been for a few years, but LinkedIn, I'm like, oh, what if I've missed something really interesting? and I log in and I have it on my phone, and I'm like, I haven't missed anything. It's just the same old stuff.
It's acknowledging that is really important.
I remove LinkedIn from my phone at weekends and I reinstall it on Monday, because otherwise it just runs away with me.
Yeah.
In terms of, I mean, is that something which can be that you think people can potentially use? I mean, you've talked about that. One of the problems is just being able to check in and do this stuff. Can you remove certain things entirely? Can you remove things at certain times of day? Could you take your work emails off your phone? And what if your company don't like that and they say that you should have emails on your work emails on your phone? Can you stand up to that?
Well, not so much in this country anymore, sadly. I think you can if it's your personal phone, but I think for your work phone, possibly not. But
if it's a work phone, you can turn it off when you're not at work, right?
Yeah, and unless it's in your contract that's part of your working role, is that you must be contactable at all times, or you must have, your work phone turned on 24/7, then absolutely. Actually, in many countries now, it is set in laws. For example, in France, they have a law whereby your employer cannot ask you to send an email after 7 p.m. You have the choice to. So if you choose, I want to send this email after 7 p.m., fine. But if they say, oh, can you jump on your emails? Or I'm going to be sending you an important email tonight. Can you pick up on that? You can actually take them to court over that, which is great. Not yet in this country, though. There isn't as many tightly bound laws around it. So if it isn't,
that only started recently in other countries, didn't it? I think it was somewhere like Portugal did it first, I believe.
Yeah, it's quite a few European countries now are starting to adopt the no logging on at night kind of approach, which is fantastic, and hopefully it will happen in the UK as well. And I think there are some more positive signs coming from the UK as well, such as the companies that are trialing the 4-day work week and that kind of thing. I've lost my train of thought now. Where was I on the? Yeah, I'm like, what was I talking about before that? We're doing digitally. Yeah, so absolutely. I think it's actually really key to be in control of your phone and not to let it be in control of you. And I think people forget that exactly what you said. You can reinstall an app within 10 seconds. So you can take it off your phone at the weekend and reinstall it. You can also set in your screen time limits on iPhones, and it's called digital wellbeing on Android. You can set limits for every app. You can say, I only want to be spending 20 minutes a day on social media, and then stop me. There are also many kind of paid apps that allow you to do this too. So one of them is Freedom. Freedom's really good. Once you pay for the year, you can use it on multiple devices. And with freedom, for example, if I go into a freedom session on my computer, I can say to it, when I'm going into a session, and I could say, I want an hour, for example, I don't want to have any access to my browsers. I don't want to have any access to my emails and so on. Like, you can say what you can and can't get into. So if I know I need to actually only have access to LinkedIn, let's say, for an hour, then I can set it so that the only thing I can go on for that hour is LinkedIn. So that's really good for deep focus as well. Freedom. The other thing that I think many people don't either realize or possibly forget is that with your emails, pretty much every email service such as Outlook has the ability to go offline. And when you go offline, you can still read all your emails, because I've suggested to people in the past, just try reducing the amount of times you go into your inbox. But then they said the trouble is that a lot of the time that's where my work is. I need to see what the responses are that have come through, or certain key points that I need to put into a report. Well, you can actually open your inbox, go offline, and then nothing new can come in, and you can deal with what's already in there, and you can work with what's already in there. You can write out emails, they'll sit in your inbox. Then when you go back online, the emails get sent, everything comes in, and that allows you to chunk your emails. I know it's not possible in every single role, but that chunking of emails, honestly, I think the stat is 28% of our working day is spent on emails. Over a quarter of our working day is spent purely on emails. Like, imagine how much more we'd get done if we halved that. And we can do that by chunking, rather than, oh, I've got another email, let me jump back into my inbox. Oh, here comes another one, and constantly jumping into our inbox, as opposed to just dealing with them. Even for some people, doing it once an hour, can still dramatically reduce down the amount of time they spend in their emails. There are also apps on your phone that can help with that as well, and set certain times that emails don't come through. But yeah, probably just removing them completely from your phone is a good idea. The problem with your phone is it goes everywhere with you. I can finish my working day, shut my laptop down, but my work is with me still. It's going on the school run with me. It's going with me when I walk the dog. It's going with me when I'm sat in a doctor's waiting room, wherever, that's what makes it almost impossible for us to switch off, because of that mobility of these digital solutions. So absolutely, making yourself in control of that by setting limits or deleting apps is hugely important. And you mentioned it before as well. The other one, turning off all your notifications, is really important too.
Yeah, I have notifications on for WhatsApp, which I primarily use, and Telegram, which I primarily use personally rather than professionally.
Yeah.
Little bits of work stuff, but very, very little. I don't have notifications on for LinkedIn. I don't have notifications on for, in fact, for any app other than the personal messaging apps and texts and phone calls. That's pretty much all I have that will come through. Anything else I have to go and check, but I will go in and check quite frequently. I will pick up my phone if I'm bored, and I will automatically open those anyway. So I have to find other ways of managing it. I'm definitely going to take on board your joy list. I think that for me, one of the big things is that I want to get back into reading. You see all these books on the shelves behind me. Haven't read most of them. Just makes me look smart. It's something that I love doing and I get a lot of value from, but I get distracted by my phone. So having that joy list, in fact, I might save my lock screen to just a note, which just says read a book. So that when I unlock my phone, it just says read a book. And I'll be like, okay, yeah, sorry, I forgot. Because it's automatic. It's just habitual. It's not because I actually want it.
Yeah. No, I changed my lock screen to say, what do you want? So when I put my phone, it says to me, what do you want? I'm like, oh yeah, what do I want to do actually? Put it down. I don't need anything from that.
It just brings you back to being mindful rather than mindless. And I think that this ties back into what we talked about right at the start, when you were saying having a slice of cake rather than eating the whole thing, having a glass of wine on a Friday rather than drinking 5 bottles before midday every day. It's about mindfulness. It's about, do I actually want to do this, or am I just doing it without thinking? One of the things that I find with regards to habit change and stress management and stuff like that, I've worked in kind of fitness, wellbeing and stuff for 11 years, and working with a lot of individuals. When I was coaching people, it was a case of not giving people rules. It was just giving people the tool to say, to ask themselves twice, do I actually want this? So if you open Instagram and you're scrolling through Instagram reels, most people do that mindlessly. But if you go, do I actually want to look at a load of reels? Most people go, No, what do I want? I want to be distracted. I want something that will make me laugh or smile. I want to be distracted. I want to be entertained. What else could I do that will entertain me? So you're just bringing it back from the unconscious into the conscious, and you can make a bit more choice around it. And I know that's a bit more around the personal use and the kind of the smartphone, the social media side of things. But it's something which I think can really, we can draw on that into our work lives as well. Given that it's 10:02, I am going to ask if anyone watching this has got any questions. If you've got any questions, please drop them into the chat. Please drop them in the comments and we will address those questions. If you're watching this on the replay, drop them into the comments anyway, because although we can't answer them now because you're watching this as a recording, we will see it. Hopefully, especially if you tag us in and we can come in and answer them. So if you're watching it on a recording, please do still comment your questions. But while people are doing that, Sam, I'd love to finish on a kind of 2 or 3 tips for managers, for leaders. We've covered some stuff recently in the last kind of 5 to 10 minutes about personal stuff, and I think there's a huge wealth of information and value there for people. But if someone, I know there's some people watching this who I've seen in the comments who are either people leaders in large organizations or in SMEs, whose names I recognize that I've kind of had interactions with in the past. If they're watching this and they lead a team of 5, 15, 50, 500 people, what would be a good starting point to start improving the digital boundaries within the teams, reduce the risk of digital burnout, whilst not sacrificing the level of connectivity, but improving overall well-being and quality of life? What's the starting point?
The starting point would be understanding the situation you're in currently, because we don't know what we need to improve until we've measured where we're currently at. So actually this brings me back to my first business, which is surveys. So obviously, depending on the size of the team, if you've got a team of 3, you can just simply have a conversation with them. If you've got a team of 500, actually surveying them about digital use within the organization. What do they find difficult about it? What do they find positive? Even asking them things like, how often are you logging in out of hours? Do you what impact is that having on you? And just, a full survey really that really delves into where are we at right now, because it's very hard to improve what we don't know. So actually getting a better understanding, like I said earlier, a lot of organizations don't really consider the negative side at all. They just see it as, here's a great comms tool, boom, let's throw it at people. And then, well, that's great. We can all talk to each other now from our own homes. So really getting a deeper understanding is hugely important. As I said, if it's just a smaller team, just having those conversations about, what do you feel is negative about these kind of solutions we're using, and what's driving you to log in at night, etc. So that understanding level is hugely important, because otherwise it's kind of like saying, going into a company and saying, right, we need to improve management in this company. Well, what's the current problem with management that how are we going to improve it without knowing what the problem is? So that's without a doubt the first step, knowing what the problem is initially. The next one we've kind of already discussed really is role modeling. So then as a leader, really making sure you are a really positive digital role model, and that you also encourage others. So, it's like doing things like saying, please don't book any meetings in for me 12 to 1 because I take a lunch hour. I'm leaving I'm going out, I'm walking my dog if I'm working from home, or I'm, just getting out for a stroll or whatever I want to do. I'm doing that for an hour. So don't book any meetings in then. I implore you all to do the same. Don't, in telling people, don't be sending emails out of hours. You're not going to get one from me. So really role modeling and then encouraging on the other side as well is really important. And then finally, paying more attention. So if you are part of these Teams chats, Slack chats, paying attention to how much of this is actually really important through our working day, or how much of it is individual conversations that shouldn't be happening. How many emails are we getting or sending with people CC'd in and they're being bombarded when they don't need to be? How many meetings are we having that we don't need to have, or how many people are coming into those meetings who don't need to be in the meeting? So really starting to open your eyes yourself to the use of digital solutions, and just starting to notice yourself what is happening, and is it all good, or is there the negative sides? And then of course it's back to what you do as well, and really noticing the signs that people are getting burnt out, they are getting highly stressed, noticing those signs, and then not just looking at as what's going on in their home life, or are they overloaded with work, but does digital have a role in this? And, how can we make sure that that stops being the case?
I think that last point is so important. It does get overlooked quite often when looking at stress, when looking at burnout and stuff like that. How these systems and how these processes can play quite a significant role. Sam, that's absolutely wonderful. Really practical stuff. I think that we've given people some insight into the background of this stuff, the theory of this stuff, but also some really actionable bits and pieces. If anyone's watching this and wants to know more about what you do or wants to get in touch with you, where's the best place for people to find you?
LinkedIn's great, which people always find ironic when I say digital solutions, but
But that's
absolutely
because some of it's positive, right?
positive use. It's all good for business. So yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best place to come and connect with me. Or, I do go into organizations and deliver workshops around creating a positive digital culture and managing digital well-being. So you can go and have a look at my website, samflynn.co.uk, and all the details of those are on there.
Excellent stuff. Sam, once again, thank you so much for your time and your expertise today. I've benefited a lot from this, so thank you from me more than anything. If you've enjoyed this, if you're watching this, if you watched it live, if you watched it on a replay, please chuck a thank you in the comments. Please hit those react buttons, those like buttons if you're watching it on YouTube as well, because it all helps get this out to more people. The more people that see this stuff, the more beneficial it is, because that ripple effect, more people doing this stuff, that will impact other people around them, more people with a better quality of life as a result, more companies with better performance as a result. Everyone wins in this situation. Really, really great to have you, Sam. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you.
I've got lots of collaboration ideas in my head now as well. Thank you everyone for watching. Next month, I will be putting up tomorrow next month's live stream. We're going to be looking at financial well-being. So another really hot topic, really interesting topic, one that's often overlooked. I have Vicky Ostrowski joining me for that, who is a kind of financial psychologist and money mindset person, who has got an incredible story and lots of useful tips for you around financial well-being as well. So keep an eye out for that. I will be putting the information up tomorrow. If you're interested, drop me a message if you don't see the post or whatever, and I'll make sure you get an invite. Once again, thank you, Sam. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, and I'm sure we'll chat again very soon.
Thanks a lot. See you later.
Cheers.